So welcome everyone to today's training. I'm doing a little bit of a training that was based off of what we did last week, but also we'll discuss some things that came from a training earlier as well. Again, my name is Annaleah. I am the Upkid manager. So if you have questions about onboarding, please feel free to let me know. And I can answer any other questions to the best of my knowledge and ability. So today's training, we're going to talk about, again, just some of the differences between neglect and homelessness and how we can recognize homelessness in the children that we take care of. And then I also wanted to go over just some very basic beginning ASL words that can help us as we work in these daycares as well. So jumping into this, what does homelessness actually mean and what does it look like? A homeless person is someone who lacks a permanent nighttime residence. So just because they might not have some place to go during the day, if they have a consistent house or shelter at night, they are not considered homeless. So this can look like multiple different things, but it can look like them living on the streets. This can also look like a family moving between temporary shelters, such as friends or family's houses. If they spend nights on different people's couches, that is still technically considered being homeless, as well as living in motels or hotels. Just because it is a roof over your head doesn't necessarily count as a permanent nighttime residence. And then living in a homeless emergency shelter. These shelters typically have different stay regulations, so it's not something that you can count. You aren't really ever sure when that is available to you. So jumping right into signs of a child being homeless or their family being homeless. These are pretty similar to signs of neglect. So this is why it's pretty important to know the family situation. And it's one of the reasons I mentioned talking to the provider about if you have suspicions of neglect, because the provider will know if this family is homeless or not. So some of these signs, again, wearing the same clothes multiple days in a row. This typically looks like dirty clothes for homeless people. They also will oftentimes have clothes that are too big or too small for them. But multiple days of the same clothes can be a sign that a child is experiencing homelessness in their family. Chronic hunger. Again, these kids aren't really sure. These families aren't really sure where their next meals will come from, simply because they can't provide for them typically. So that hunger comes from the family being homeless. Changes or inconsistencies in grooming. Going back to homeless shelters, if they are able to stay in one, they typically have added resources given to them. So the child might be able to actually have hair products that they can use, versus if they're no longer able to stay in that homeless shelter, they might not have access to those grooming needs and abilities while living on the streets or at friends' houses. Children will also oftentimes have difficulty socializing. They have a distrust of their situation. That inconsistency of home life can cause a lot of social anxiety. They also typically lack social interaction a lot of the times, so they just don't have a lot of practice in it. And then there's different effects that homelessness has on kids as well. So some of those, oftentimes these children witness violence and will be separated from their families. That's a very harsh reality of being homeless, but it is very hard for these families to stay together. And if you're a child living on the street, you're most likely witnessing things that no child really should have to be able to witness. They oftentimes will struggle in school, including having learning disabilities. Oftentimes they'll have suspensions, and they possibly will need to repeat grades. These struggles in school often relate to not having consistent transportation to school, so they'll often miss days, or they don't have the resources and needs to be able to enhance their learning outside of school. So those learning disabilities come from just not being able to practice what they are learning. A lot of these kids will have emotional problems as well. They experience the highs and lows more frequently and more often. And being able to manage those emotions can be pretty hard. So some of these kids will have anger issues, or they'll be really sensitive to things. They'll cry more often. Just a lot of different things when it comes to emotions. And then half of homeless school-aged kids also experience depression. So this is another struggle and effect that can take place on these children who unfortunately have this hard living experience. So we are child care providers. We do work in daycares. So there are benefits that can come from these kids that are experiencing homelessness for them being in child care. What do you guys think some of those benefits could be?
I think one of the benefits could possibly be that they get to socialize with other kids, kind of, you know?
Yeah, definitely. That it does give them a really good opportunity and location to practice those socialization skills. Eitzel also said food. Yep, definitely. These daycares have a lot of provisions that homeless families don't have. Food is definitely one of them. Any other possible benefits? Okay, I will get into the ones that I thought of. So one of the benefits for childcare is it sets a routine for these children. When you're living on the streets or in these homeless shelters, it's really hard to have a set food schedule, nap time schedules, homework schedules, everything like that. It's just very hard to establish because you don't know where your next meal is going to come from. You don't know when you're going to have time to rest. So being able to come into this structured daycare setting, preschool setting, where meals are provided at around the same time every day, you have art time and outside time. All of these different things help create a routine and schedule for these kids, which is very important for their growth and development. Again, going along with that growth and development, daycares provide a safe, nurturing place to promote healthy development and growth. So them being around safe adults can help them to meet those milestones that they're supposed to be meeting at their age. Jada just mentioned saying that they also learn healthy habits and skills that they may not learn at home. Definitely. Things that they don't necessarily even have experience in because they aren't around situations of saying please or thank you for things. All of these different things can come from a place of nurturing that a daycare is able to provide for these kids. Daycares also allow for parents and caregivers of these children to focus on meeting their goals, so that they are able to get out of the situation that they are in. A lot of these parents have a hard time finding jobs because they're more concerned about the health and safety of their children, and making sure that they're in a safe place. So being able to have these kids in the daycares, it allows for those parents to have that mental break, to be able to do schooling or to job interview. It allows them to find those resources that will ultimately enable them to put their family in a better situation. And then there's also a lot of access to different information that can help them get out of their current situation. Daycare providers have a lot of different funds and things that can come from government, and other places that do a lot of different things. Some of those things are mentioned here. But as a family that is experiencing homelessness, having my children in these daycare settings, again, they are able to have consistent food for that day. And the government can help supplement for that, but they also can get different help with medical bills or finding employment, mental stability and addiction recovery. These are all different programs that are available out there, for these homeless families. Before I move on to the next slide, are there any questions that we have so far? Perfect. So moving on, we're going to do a little bit of ASL. So hopefully all of you guys can see me. I do have my screen pinned, so even if somebody else talks, you should still be able to see me. Going into this, I came up with 8 different signs that are beneficial to know in these daycare settings, both for kids that aren't able to communicate any other way, but it's become very popular and common for parents of infants and toddlers to also teach their children these signs, to help them with communication while they're still learning words. So these are just 8 very basic, simple ASL signs that are good to know and can help out in a daycare setting. So the first one that I want to go over is milk. This is a lot more common for your infants and toddlers, but it's a pretty common first sign that they learn. So with most of these signs, you're going to be using your dominant hand. So whichever one is dominant is the hand you use. I am right-handed, so all of these will be done with my right hand. But milk, you're going to take your hand, and kind of have it just in this weird little circle shape, and then you squeeze. So this is milk. A good way to picture this is, or at least how it was explained to me, is picture that you're actually milking a cow. So squeezing, it's that same motion with your hand to sign milk. Something else with these signs is to remember that these children that know these signs, they don't have super good fine motor skills yet, which means that some of these signs, while they might look the exact same as what I will be showing you, some of the kids might not sign them perfectly. So there are different variations, but anything similar to this typically is milk. The next one is more. So this is a 2-hand sign, but more, I picture just like little puppets. That's your finger shape. And then you're going to take the fingerprints and you're just going to tap them together. So this is more kind of from a different angle. With this one, I see very commonly kids that'll have one hand that's flat and they'll go like that for more. Or they'll do it with just a couple fingers, any different variation, but that typically is more for these kids. Next one, all done or finished. This one again is a two-hand. You're gonna take both hands and kind of have them just in this palm, open fingered, can be closed fingers as well. You're gonna start with them facing you, and then you're gonna turn them away twice. So if I was to say, I'm all done, I'm all finished. Pretty easy that way. That one, kids will simplify it to just one hand, but that one typically does look pretty similar, whether it's a child or an adult signing. And then please. This is one that has a lot of variation to it that I see in kids. But please, you're going to take that same flat hand shape and then you're going to place it on your chest and you're going to rub it. So this is please. This one, a lot of times what I see in kids is they'll just take their hand and just smack their chest. And that's please. They'll just smack it. They'll also sometimes rub up and down instead of in a circle. But normally if they have their hand on their chest and you've asked them to say please, that is them saying please. So that's 4 for this side. Are there any questions before we move on to the next 4? Any signs you want me to repeat? Anything like that? Okay. Going through the next 4 then. Thank you. Thank you is a pretty common sign that a lot of people know. And I'm going to turn a little bit for this one. So this one you're going to take again just that palm, but you're going to start it on your chin and then you just go up. So thank you. Thank you. That one's pretty easy. And again, a lot of kids know thank you. But right hand or dominant hand on your chin and out and down. The next one is food or eat. This one you're gonna take the same, your dominant hand in the same shape as before. So again, just that top of the hand. And you're gonna tap your fingertips to your mouth. So food, eat. This one's more common in your toddlers, the children that aren't just drinking milk, they're being introduced to the solid foods or the creamed foods, anything like that. Typically those children will be the ones that again will sign the food or eat, the more sign, shape, and tap it to your mouth. Yes and no, I'll go over both of these. No isn't super common for kids to know, but I'll go over it just because again, it's yes or no, it's the opposites. So yes, you'll just take your fist, dominant hand again, and you just nod it, kind of like a head. You're just saying yes. And then no, you're going to take your pointer and middle finger and your thumb, and you're going to tap them together. So kind of imagining like a bird tweeting, it's no. So those are the other 4 signs. Do we have any questions about these signs? Need them repeated or any question about anything on this training? Okay.